Welcome back to another edition of the Edge Podcast. Managing Editor Brenden Slaughter, joined as always by Recruiting Analyst Jared Halus. It's a special edition of the Edge Podcast, early National Letter of Intent Day. Oregon State signed 11 commitments, or 11 signees today, rather, and we'll be breaking them all down here. Jared, just right before we get into it, what'd you think of the day so far? Oregon State obviously wrapped it up relatively quickly in the morning. We knew it would be a small class. Like I said, we'll be breaking it down in detail, but just what do you think as everything kind of came together today?
Yeah. I think it's important to note right away that 2 of those 11 were preferred walk-ons. So yes. 9 scholarships, one of them being from the 2018 class originally. So overall, though, just to get back to the question, I think great day. One thing that really has always stood out to me since I've been working on Edge is that it's always pretty drama-free. Not even just signing day, but throughout the whole recruiting process for a lot of these guys, it's like once they're locked in with Oregon State, like the staff does an excellent job making sure that those guys are continuing to be locked in throughout the whole process. And so I you saw it again this year. Of course, they had less people to work on, but really, I mean, you've got classes like let's just say Georgia, for example. They had a guy who's like #1 junior college prospect in the country flip from them to Jackson State to go play for primetime Deion Sanders.
Hey, he's been getting some guys though. I mean, yes, I gotta give primetime his due.
But all I'm trying to say is like it's always drama free, and drama can sometimes be fun if it goes your way. But at the same time, it's also nice to be confident in the guys you have coming in and know that they're going to be Beavers, and we saw it again today.
Certainly. And, as we kind of break into it, we're obviously going to get right into the podcast. So, Jared, I think we should just get right into it as we are actually recording this podcast just before head coach Jonathan Smith is supposed to meet the media later today. So let's just go ahead and get right on into it. Right off the bat, Sam Vidlac, quarterback, local homegrown kid coming in from Grants Pass, Hidden Valley, 6'1", 185 pounds. Jared, we've talked about Sam. We've had Sam on this podcast. Sam is someone that we really think has a high ceiling at Oregon State and fits the program extremely well. What would you have to say about him?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit on the head. High character kid. Yep. He's just good off the field as he is on it. And he's so excited, man. He's locked in. It's easy to forget that he was at one point committed to Montana because of how locked in he's been since he's been an Oregon State commit. He instantly hit the ground running recruiting for the team, trying to bring in a bunch of other players to join the class, and did a fantastic job with that. He's been the definition of what you'd want to see from a committed recruit. There was never a single question about, his future after he committed to Oregon State. So it's been super cool to follow along with him throughout the process. Hell of a player. I mean, guy lights it up. And if you remember back to the episode where we had Mike, our publisher Mike Singer on here, stones was the word. He's got some stones. He's a playmaker, and you got to have stones to be a playmaker, especially at the quarterback position. So great addition, fantastic addition. I'm excited to see him.
And then obviously we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that the Oregon State second edition, as we move right along ahead, Jake Blair coming in from Camas, Washington. The Beavers continuing that Camas pipeline after Jack Coletto came in a couple years ago as a quarterback and turned into, quite the multifaceted guy. I know Jonathan Smith and his staff really like that program up there at Camas. It's a pretty solid program, or even more than pretty solid, a very good program over the last few years. And I've actually got a chance to see him play a couple times. With Blair, I mean, obviously coming in as a preferred walk-on, we've seen that. Jackson Chris did that I believe it was 2 recruiting cycles ago now, maybe it was last year. And, the Beavers like to do this occasionally, take a flyer on a guy at quarterback that, could pan out. Jonathan Smith says it all the time. He himself started as a walk-on. So, sometimes you want to keep that door open, give a guy a chance. And just kind of like you mentioned with Sam, knowing how Jonathan Smith and his staff know that program, Jake Blair is just another high character guy coming in from a great program. It'll fit this program like a glove.
Yeah, no, again, you hit it on the head. And I think that's important for a lot of PWO guys. When your head coach started his college career as a preferred walk-on, was able to make a name for himself. and earn a scholarship. So I think when you're able to kind of say like, listen, this is the opportunity that you're gonna have here, but I want you to know that there's a lot more that can come with this opportunity. Which obviously, I mean, getting a scholarship is an incredible accomplishment, and all the guys deserve it, but there's only so many you can give at the end of the day. So I think they always do a really great job of adding some preferred walk-ons as well, and Jake's another great testament to that.
Certainly. And again, just another guy that, the Beavers just kind of identified, knew that they liked, another guy that would fit in their system. And, we've seen, a guy like, Jackson Chris, as I just mentioned, is kind of still in that role. And even mentioned, he's always a guy that's mentioned. Tristan Gebbia is always a guy that, mentioned him throughout the year. Chance has already mentioned him a couple times. So, the tight bondness of those guys in that quarterback room definitely cannot be understated. So I think they're just adding another high character guy, which will only help down the line. Moving to the backfield now, one of the gems of this recruiting class, Jared, I know you and I have been excited about this guy for a while when, not to toot my own horn, but I was the guy that called he was going to come here, I believe, quite a while ago. And you were giving me a hard time about it back then. So, maybe I had an intuition. But anywho, on to Demir Collins, the 5'9", 186-pound running back out of Jefferson, a former 4-star recruit, ended up checking in as a 3. Jared, he is an explosive athlete. He can do a lot of different things, and he'll really kind of fit that Brian Lindgren offense of being able to be multifaceted and, get the ball in space and be able to make plays. And given that the Beavers, kind of are always looking for playmakers on offense, I think more so than anyone else in this class, he will have a chance to contribute early in some fashion. Kick return, punt return, just, even a few routes out of the backfield, what have you.
Yeah, no, Demir's a great player. He really is. And I still remember texting you, like, I don't know, like, I think it was, I mean, this had to probably be over a year ago or maybe right around a year ago. And I think it was a mailbag question. Somebody asked, like, what 2021 player would you, be comfortable saying, or like who's the top rated 2021 player you think will land? Well, something along those lines. And you said Demir. I was like, that's interesting. It felt too early to say that to me because at that point in time, he's blowing up, getting offers from who knows what. And at that point in time, it's worth also noting that he had a really good relationship with the coaching staff at the other school in the state of Oregon.
Yes, you'd be remiss if you did not mention how certain circumstances maybe guided him to
Sure.
Oregon State as opposed to maybe that school in the South. Not going to speak for him or anything, but
Absolutely.
given that he had a coach that went there, that closed the door on Oregon.
Yeah, but I mean, not that that's even the main reason. We always talk about Coach Petrie being such a great recruiter, and this is another example of that. And one thing that I really love too is that they really roll the dice. They don't send out a lot of offers. Especially Petrie. There's the same thing last year with Isaiah Newell. They just find their guy, and I mean, they full court press it,
Yep.
and you've seen it pay off. And this is another, great addition.
Press. I love that wording, the full court press. I love that.
Yeah. No, they do. They put in all their effort right off the bat, and they do it throughout the whole cycle. So super interesting. Demir. I remember another thing too, when he was kind of making a name for himself. Coach Petrie going out there, and I think Demir had like 250 yards.
Yep.
God knows how many touchdowns. But, hey, this is somebody they have to keep in the state. Here we are today, signed his national letter of intent. It's amazing. It really is.
Yeah, and just my last point on Demir. I mean, you and I have talked about it. I think, we both written pieces on just the impact of, having those native Oregonians, in your program, especially for Oregon State. We talk about guys like Henry Buckles, who we'll talk about later in this podcast, Sam, obviously, as we just talked about, getting that, and obviously with Collins, getting those homegrown guys, especially for a school like Oregon State, it goes a long way. It's a whole separate podcast on exactly how, but all I can say is it goes a long way. So Demir, huge addition. Again, the backfield is deep. And that's what I caution Edge fans of thinking he's maybe going to play right away, because we look at this year. A lot of edgers maybe expected Arnez Madison to get in the mix this year. There's many mailbag questions about it, right? Even Isaiah Newell. But the Beavers really go 1-2 At running back, Calvin Tyler got a pretty good run against Utah with B.J. Baylor and Jamar back against Stanford. Calvin Tyler, I think, got 1 or 2 carries. So the Beavers like to go 1-2. So that's where I think in the case of Collins, him being able to be that guy that could go right away and do kick returns, punt returns. And again, the Beavers showed this last year. It's possible that they could play true freshmen. Zariah Beeson is that example. So something to keep an eye on. But again, really excited about Demir Collins' future. Over to the wide receiver, Jimmy Valsen, another guy. Jared and I were just really excited from the moment we heard he was going to be a commit. 6'3", 190-pounder from Arlington, Texas. Again, 2 straight years of a receiver that many other Texas schools wanted, that Oregon State was able to draw out of there. I ended up doing a story on that pipeline, Jared, and you've done stuff as well. The Beavers are, starting to build some inroads down there. And in the case of Valsen, he brings size to a position that needs it. And more than anything, I think he's going to be a really good player for him.
Yeah, no, it's a state that you want to definitely have some kind of pipeline built to. But, many schools fail to do that. And Oregon, just geographically, it's pretty crazy to think that it's becoming a thing.
Yep.
But it is. And it's a great thing. And obviously, Valsen is the latest addition from the state. He's a great player. We noted last year a lot of they brought in great, fantastic players, but maybe something that was missing was the size, the guy to get up and go grab the jump balls. We know they've got speed. In last year's class, Trevor Pope, Silas Bolden, those guys,
they're quick,
fast guys, but not 6'3".
Yep.
So when you have a guy coming in at 6'3", I think, even on the updated height and weight, 6'3", 190, he's got the size already.
Yep.
And he's only going to get bigger once he gets to Oregon State. So, having that guy could be a difference maker. And maybe not right away, like you said. It's hard for any freshman to come in.
Yeah, but
it's possible.
Yeah, and that's what I have, and that's kind of my point with, like, as you mentioned, that's, as far as like it not being easy, typically it's not. And you look this year, Zariah Beeson was kind of the only guy. Mm-hmm. And you go back to like before the season, Jonathan Smith, Brian Lindgren, he could play. And then as it got closer, he's gonna play. And now with Colby Taylor's retirement, he's starting this weekend against Arizona State. So he goes from, being a high school football player last year to enrolling early to being ready to go, getting those crucial, 3 spring practices or whatever it was, and in April or March, and then was able to turn in a pretty good season, all things considered. And I bet that in a year like this, that experience is paramount. So the receivers, is it possible? Sure, the Beavers are deep there, but again, the size. You look this last weekend, Trayshawn Harrison has a little bit more size than everyone else in that room, and he made a big impact. So I think that's certainly possible. So something to keep an eye on there as well. Jared, I'm really curious to get your thoughts on Oregon State's latest tight end. It always seems like Brian Wozniak and company always seem to go get a couple guys that you and I are just super intrigued about, whether it was Tommy Spencer and Jake Overman last year. Now they pick up another tight end. I mean, are the Beavers trying to go for like a tight end? You hear things, take some of Stanford's thunder here, or at some point, is it going to be too many mouths to feed?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it'll work itself out one way or the other. Tight end's a position where sometimes you could see people just like, they get there, they put on a bunch of weight and they realize maybe I should play on like offensive tackle or something.
Right.
Or, you obviously with the transfer portal become a thing now. I'm not saying that's going to happen at all, but it is another option as well. I think they're going to try to get a tight end pretty much in every class, at least one.
Yeah.
JT is a great one. Just continuing, like you said, and talk about size. He certainly doesn't lack any of that. Massive guy. I remember Gorney telling me when they picked up the commitment, like this is your first down, go getter. Just throw it up.
6'6", 240 almost. I mean, Jared, that is just objectively speaking, that is a massive human.
Massive human. I always like to say that is a massive human. And JT's pretty athletic as well, despite his size. So he's another great addition. Guy that got overlooked. He really did.
Yeah.
And I think he's got the opportunity simply because of the size. And again, we talk about the athleticism, but I mean, it's how can you
Why do you think he maybe was overlooked? Because I kind of looking at his profile a little bit, I kind of came to that same conclusion, as I was kind of looking at him and even looking at him deeper today.
Mhm.
Why do you maybe think that was? I mean, the same kind of reason that maybe Tommy Spencer was a little bit more overlooked last year?
Well, Tommy's school was a little bigger. It can always be a variety of reasons. Sometimes, and I am not saying by any means at all, this is what happened. Sometimes the coaches don't send out enough stuff about their players.
Hmm.
Sometimes, there's just not enough media or any kind of attention on the schools, maybe because they're not, winning a bunch of games or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not diamonds in the rough.
Right.
And, without obviously California didn't get to play this year, so there's no telling how good Carmel would have been. But obviously 2-star rating on a 6'6" tight end is something that people will question, and hopefully he'll come in and prove everybody wrong.
Yeah, certainly. And you look, and particularly speaking, I mean, not that Tegan Quatoriano was a massively high recruit either. I mean, Luke Musgrave was a little higher. I believe he was a 3. So, I mean, there's obviously variance, and we talk about it all the time. Coaches don't pay much mind to those types of things. They want the guys that are going to fit the program, the guys that, and that's why I said, I believe Jonathan Smith, we wrote about it the other day, small but mighty. It's a class that fits. It's a class that they know is really tight knit. They're going to fit their program well. And more so than other years, they were able to do their homework. You can do your homework on 11 guys a lot more so than, I mean, not to say that you can't, but you can just be so much more in depth and so much more in detail with 11 guys as opposed to say 20, or more, some of these bigger recruiting classes. So Oregon State, I think, was able to specialize and really identify people that are great for the program. So that's always a good thing as well. So moving right along after JT Byrne, let's move up front to the offensive line. Another addition for Jim Mahalchek and co. He's going to like this one. Another local guy, Henry Buckles, a guy that you and I, again, had on the podcast. Really enjoyed talking with him. 6'2", 285-pounder from Hood River. Jim Mahalchek is a great evaluator of talent. And from watching what I've seen on tape from Henry and knowing his Mahalchek's track record of developing talent, he's a guy that, in a couple years, I think could really, challenge for a starting spot on the line. He's got that potential.
And another in-state guy as well.
Yes, very
Henry,
important.
He was the first commit in the class. He kicked things off really right after he got his offer. He went on a visit. Obviously loved what he's seen. It wasn't his first time on campus by any means. Right. Growing up where he did, he grew up, ready for this opportunity. So once it came, he was sure to jump all over it. He was another guy where you never questioned his commitment level to the program. He was, always true and always very, super responsive to us. We've talked a lot on this one, in particular, this class, about high character guys. And you'll also hear us say a lot that, this could be a guy that comes in and makes an impact. That's just because that's the way it is. Yeah. And Henry's just another example of that.
Certainly. And I think he'll be a guy that has the potential, an offensive line, unless you're a rah-rah, just massively big recruit, you usually need a couple years of seasoning, and a couple years to kind of get your weight up and, figure out what part of, find your pecking order, and so to speak. And just historically with what Coach Mahalchek has done, usually not putting a lot of the younger guys on there. But again, Buckles being a local guy, an Oregonian, reminds me of a guy like Blake Brandel, who came from Central Catholic and turned out to be, one of the better left tackles the Beavers ever had, just as far as he just lived and breathed Oregon State. And that's the kind of the same thing that I get from you, in your conversations with Henry. It's just like you said, he had been preparing for an opportunity like this, and this is where he wants to be. And that's always a super cool thing. So, kudos to him for that. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, Jared, arguably another one of the real gems of this class. As you mentioned, beat out a couple big time schools for Omarion Fa'amo. Did I get it right?
Close. So it's like there's a little bit of I don't even know what the origin of that last name would be. Probably like some sort of Hawaiian, but it's Fa'amoy.
Fa'amoy. Okay, so there you go. The 6'2", 270-pounder Fa'amoy from from Salt Lake City, Utah, West High School. This was one of the recruiting battles that was just, in a word, impressive. And I would just kind of like to get your thoughts on why, and particularly how you see this as one that is almost like a program defining, win as far as knocking out some of the bigger suitors to land his services.
It's crazy because even the closest people to Marion were completely clueless about what it was going to do. He kept it all on the hip. And his coaches, his family, even his parents, had no clue what was going to happen. I think everyone really expected him to stay home and go to Utah. He's a legacy at Utah. I don't think his parents played sports, but they went there. So everybody's like kind of just thinking, he's quiet, so he's probably just going to stay home.
Yeah.
And not only that, but he's got offers from Nebraska. He's got offers from Tennessee, LSU offers. Yeah. But the guy's got offers.
I mean, LSU is pretty good these days.
They're all right. Maybe not so much this year.
I guess not these days, but I mean, as far as like recent success, I mean, that's something that's going to get your eyes. You're like, whoa,
Certainly. I mean, the offer sheet speaks for itself.
Yep.
He's continued to keep it locked, but that's admirable in a lot of ways. You can tell he's a guy that just wants to put in the work. He doesn't care about all the flashy rah-rah here and there, whatever. He just wants to put in the work. And, a fantastic addition. He did get to play football in 2020. Utah, a lot of guys, even from the state of Oregon, moved out to Utah so they could play football. And luckily for him, he was already there, had a good season, like eight tackles for loss nearly. So he's a disruptor, and that's what Oregon State needed. They may be looking for more in this class, but he's definitely a good addition.
Well, and the thing for me is he just fills such a big position of need. You look at what Oregon State was really missing this year on defense. You saw the growth, in my opinion, in the linebacker position. The depth is there in the secondary, but you really could tell they were missing, Jordan Whitley, who obviously, unfortunately, was diagnosed, with a heart condition and didn't end up playing this year. And, continued thoughts and prayers to go out to him as well. And then Jeremy Reichner with the reported opt-out as well. Those were two guys that would have been game changers for this defense, in my opinion. And, a lot of edgers have been asking us, how can there not be more, defensive line? How come, they're not attacking it? Well, I think Fa'amoy is a good enough player where I think he can play right away and potentially could get really good, snaps as far as being able to be in the rotation quickly. And then, also I think they're going to look at transfer portal and options like that as well. So, I think the options are open, but as far as like the inverse, I think of like the Henry Buckles situation, Fa'amoy is a guy who I think could come in and potentially be not a plug and play guy, but a guy that potentially could be, ready to contribute earlier than maybe, most. And, for how talented I believe that he is, I think we'll just have to wait and see. But it's another really big addition for the Beavers. They get a guy that can really get after the quarterback, and that's always a good thing. Moving along back to the other side, or back a little further in the defense to linebacker, another really early commitment in this one, Easton Mascarenas. Did I get it right that time?
Yeah, you did.
Nice. All right, 6 foot, 225-pounder, outside linebacker. What can you not say about Easton? Just an impressive player. Just reading like his bio and whatnot earlier today. Just, a great guy, another high character guy, brings a lot to the table. And, oh, wait, guess what? His brother's Achille Arnold. Pretty cool deal. And maybe a little, hey, bro, come on over here to Oregon State. But however it worked. And now Oregon State has got another pair of brothers in the program.
Yeah, Easton was another guy that was identified early on before the 2020 class was even signed. So Easton's been a guy that they've been after for a while. Obviously, like you said, you've got Achille, who is also probably in his ear about it. Although if you ask him, he'll tell you, it's always just regular conversation.
Yeah.
He never influenced me one way or another. Of course, if you're his brother, you're probably like, yeah, I mean, it'd be amazing for you to come here. And he did say that that's something that they talked about growing up, of course. But when it came down to it and the opportunity was actually there, it wasn't something where he was like, bro, you got to come here. But it ended up happening. Credit to the staff and probably some credit to Achille as well for that. His parents were super comfortable with the decision. And just another super great addition. Like you said, he's an awesome guy. Always been super responsive. And he's throughout the year, I could see him just getting more locked in and getting more involved, watching all the games, everything like that. So super great addition. He's going to bleed black and orange till
Yep.
hopefully he goes to the league.
And certainly, again, and just another guy that I think really fits the program well. You bring in, like you said, a brother. I think that continues to fit the high character guy. Obviously, his parents probably really liked Coach Smith. Particularly even, Tim Tibesar, I'm sure, was in those conversations as well. So really cool deal there. Moving along to the next linebacker on our list. You might have to help me with this one, Jared. Semesi Saluni?
I think that's pretty close.
Semesi, yeah, okay. It's like all fairness and apologies to in advance. I'll get your all's names soon enough if I'm butchering them slightly. But the 6'4", 252 pounder, arguably the biggest adjustment from where he was as far as his player card from 2018. This was an LDS mission kid, but added on significant weight from what that player card was. And I think this is a guy who, you look at the last mission linebacker the Beavers got, Riley Sharp.
Right.
He was ready to go, like boom, boom, boom. He was ready. I believe he redshirted 1 year, but then was basically ready to go. And these mission kids, they have sometimes the maturity aspect. I remember a couple years ago writing that feature, or last year, on Sharp, and talking to Coach Smith and how the maturity of these, LDS kids come in, they're older, their, bodies are a little bit more developed, so on and so forth. Could this be a guy that we see maybe sneak into the rotation being a much older freshman?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I really wanted to get at. He's an old freshman,
Yep.
As far as eligibility goes, he's got the same as everybody else, but age-wise, he's older.
Yep.
And he's had that time to, as you pointed out, develop his body, get ready to be at that Pac-12 Power 5 FBS level. And obviously he's very much that physically now. It's just going to be a matter of him, getting in, learning the systems and
Yep.
applying that all. So he could absolutely make an impact. Linebacker, of course, at Oregon State recently has been not really a position of need, just because the guys they've got have been so good. But things happen, as we saw with Avery and everything like that. So you never know when you're going to be called up. So for him to come in prepared physically like the way he has, made the most of his 2 years going, and now there's no doubt he's ready to go. He's been locked in.
Certainly, and again, we'll move right along to the last linebacker in the class. It's a preferred walk-on, Jake Perella, the 6'4", 215-pound outside linebacker. Jared, this was kind of an addition that came on a little bit later in the process, and a guy that, as far as those preferred walk-ons go, we're hearing that the Beavers were pretty excited about him.
Yeah, no, he surprised everyone. His dad played football in Nebraska, and he had an opportunity to continue that legacy. Instead, decided that he wanted to play at Oregon State. We haven't talked to Jake, so I couldn't tell you why. But if I had to bet, it's just, again, like we were talking about earlier, the opportunity that lies at Oregon State, and the fact that the staff could come to him and say, yes, here's your preferred walk-on opportunity. Come make the most of it. See what happens. And he's a really good player. Had a great season last year. So there's no doubt that he's probably spent all this time getting himself ready. And I'm sure you can see it just on social media. The guy's ready to go, just like everybody else.
And again, and just another addition, we always like to keep an eye on those preferred walk-on guys, because as we've seen in the Smith tenure, it's not uncommon for those guys to work really hard and end up being scholarship guys by the time they're all said and done. And, Jonathan even said as much earlier this year, saying, that's one of his favorite parts of the job, is being able to reward those guys the same way he was rewarded, for being, that guy all, 20 some odd years ago now. So again, those are the parts of the recruiting process that are really special. So again, a couple guys that you're absolutely pulling for in the long run. To wrap up the group, small group, as we mentioned, just 11 additions. And now we wrap up with Arnez Madison, the defensive back of the group, 6'2", 170 pounds, from Los Angeles, California. Jared, were the Beavers able to tiptoe into, UCLA and USC territory and emerge with someone that those two schools may be like, we missed one here?
Yeah. I mean, I think time will tell the answer to that question. But on the surface, Arnez is a guy with great size, another really smart kid, cool kid to talk to. And I mean, if you read the bio that the staff put out today, and that we've got on Beaver's Edge, the kid wants to study pre-law.
Love
So
it.
if that doesn't say anything about his mindset and his maturity, then I don't know what will. Because I can tell you for sure that when I was his age, I barely knew how to even get into something like that. So he's definitely another great addition.
I didn't
He's
even know what I was going to major in at that point, Jared. I mean, like going to my freshman year, I'm like, I think I want to do this. And, I ended up going marketing and switched it around to communications. And that's what I ended up sticking with. But to be right now going into college saying, I'm doing this, that is some mental fortitude. This guy is a man with a plan.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. And he's again, not to focus solely on what he does off the field. Great player as well. He's a long guy. He's going to be another disruptor in the passing game, and look for him to turn some heads.
Do you think that just looking at his frame, is there room for him to add some weight to that 170? 6'2". How ideally, where would you like to see him be to get to kind of? I think like Nashawn, right? Kind of a taller guy, a little bit more lanky. He's not super big, but added a little bit more weight, just from like last year, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's close. I'd say 185, 190 for 6'2". I'm about 6'1", and I'm about 180, 185. Fluctuates. So I mean, I'm not nearly as athletic as him. So he probably
better compare 40 times, Jared. Let's get you and Arnez out there.
He probably uses that little less weight to fly around in ways that I couldn't even dream of.
Yep.
So, it's hard to say, but I think just as far as physicality goes, he may want to put on a couple more pounds.
For sure. And again, just a really cool story. And like you said, definitely going to be someone who's extremely focused on his studies when he arrives in Corvallis. So that'll go ahead and wrap up this edition of the podcast. Make sure to stay tuned to beaversedge.com. We're going to continue to have more content throughout the day. We'll have Jonathan Smith's reaction, and then Jared and I will have content tomorrow on Thursday as well. So make sure and keep it locked to beaversedge.com. Thanks for checking out this episode.